Okay, our text this morning is Ecclesiastes, beginning in chapter 9 and verse 11. So let me read the remainder of the text. So turn again in your Bible to Ecclesiastes, chapter 9. And I shall read beginning in verse 11. I returned and saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the man of understanding, nor favor to men of skill. But time and chance happen to them all. For man also does not know his time, like fish taken in a cruel net, like birds caught in a snare. So the sons of men are snared in an evil time, when it falls suddenly upon them. Now this wisdom I have also seen under the sun, and it seemed great to me. There was a little city with few men in it, and a great king came against it and besieged it, and built a great snare around it. Now there was found in it a poor wise man, and he by his wisdom delivered the city. Yet no one remembered the same poor man. Then I said, wisdom is better than strength. Nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised, and his words are not heard. Words of the wise spoken quietly should be heard, rather than the shout of a ruler of fools. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. Now, there are all kinds of people in this world. There are rich people and poor people. And there are tall people and short people. And there are the VIPs and the VOPs. The VIPs are the very important people. The VOPs are the very ordinary people. But we also have the wise people and the foolish people. Now, this text here is about wisdom and folly, right? And so there are just two parts, right? So in chapter 9, verse 11 through the end, is about wisdom. And then the whole of chapter 10 is about folly. So let us then look at this in turn. Wisdom and folly. And Solomon has something to say about wisdom. So in chapter 9, he tells us a few things. Number one, he says that being wise does not mean that you will always succeed. Being wise does not mean that you will always succeed. And then he gives 5 examples, right, to back him up. Because in this world, we don't believe him. Right? We say, oh, you are clever, you will always succeed. Right? And so he gave us 5 examples, right, to prove his point. So in verse 11, he says, I returned and saw under the sun. So he was making observation in this world. That's what he means. And then he realizes that the race is not to the swift, the battle not to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the men of understanding or intelligence, nor favor to men of skill, or that is, men of knowledge. Now, so those are the examples. He says, just because you are clever, you are wise, you are intelligent, you have knowledge, that doesn't mean that you will win. Just because you are smart, right? Solomon said, my observation is that there's no guarantee. We know that there are many gifted people, gifted children perhaps, but they don't make it in life. Of course, we think that they will make it, but not necessarily so. Something can suddenly strike, and then that person is gone, all right, it's finished. And that's what Solomon is saying here, right? So that you say, why is it that if you are smart, you will not necessarily win or succeed? Well, he tells us, again in verse 11, right, the third part, say, but time and chance happen to them all. And that's the reason, because he says what he means is this, is that we are all kind of victim of times and chance. That is to say that there are things happening out of our sight that determine the final outcome. We cannot see it. Maybe a virus, a disease, something that's behind the scene, and then it strikes. We cannot see. But we're helpless when it strikes. It's never mind if you are clever. It doesn't mean that you only strike the stupid people or the foolish people, right? So cleverness, right, intelligence or knowledge cannot immunize you from this kind of things. And so that is, in other words, the unseen factor that is beyond our control. In verse 12, right, he kind of elaborates on that. For man does not know his time. We are like fish, he says, so he gave a picture here. We are like fish taken in a cruel net. Or we are like birds caught in a snare. Now we can see that when we see these creatures, the fish, helpless, they'll swim happily and then they're caught in the net. Or we see the bird in the air and then there's a trap. Unaware, now they're caught in the trap. We see these creatures around us. But Solomon is saying that we are actually like this. We are like the fish and like the birds. Equally helpless. Doesn't matter if you're a clever bird, right? Or a very smart fish. Or smart human. And so you see, that is what Solomon is thinking about. So he's making observations. And he says that, well, there are these clever people, but there is no guarantee, right? Because misfortune can just strike, and then it's done. We are done. And so what is the lesson? I think the lesson is this. We just flip over to Jeremiah, right, chapter 9. Jeremiah chapter 9. I think it's good for us to take heed to what Jeremiah says here, in light of what Solomon is saying. So in Jeremiah chapter 9, beginning in verse 23, it says here, thus says the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man glory in his might, nor the rich man glory in his riches. That is our human tendency. But the Bible advises us against that. But, he says in verse 24, but let him who glories in this, that he understand and knows me, that I am the Lord, exercising loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in this I delight, says the Lord. So you want to boast? He said, don't boast in your cleverness, or in your ability, in your accomplishment. You want to boast? He said, this is the only thing we can boast. We boast in the Lord, that we know God. If you don't know God, well, there's nothing you can boast. There's nothing that can protect you or can ensure success for you. Let him boast. The Bible says, let him glory in this, that he understand and know God, and knows God. Now, there's a second thing Solomon tells us about wisdom here, right? So he says, firstly, that wisdom, as he observed, right, does not always guarantee success. You can have it, but no guarantee, because there are so many things you cannot see, the unseen factor. And we are just helpless victims, like the fish, like the bird. Now, secondly, he says, now being wise does not mean that you will always be appreciated or recognized. Right? So sometimes that's what we think. We are very wise, we are very intelligent, we are very knowledgeable, we are people with great accomplishment, that we will be recognized. You say, not necessarily so. And then he gives us an illustration, right, in verses 13 through 15. And Solomon says this, now this wisdom I've also seen under the sun, again making his earthly observations about life on earth, and it seems great to me. In other words, as he look at this world and the people of the world and sees wisdom, spark of wisdom here and there, wisdom is great. Now remember, Solomon here is not playing down wisdom. So wisdom is great. But then he says, the reality in this world is that just being wise does not mean that you will be recognized. So the example he gives is this, in verse 14. There was a little city filled with few men in it. And then the great king came against it and besieged it and built a great snare around it. So they're being attacked and captured by a great king. And so the people in this city were in trouble. But then in verse 15, now there was found in this troubled city a poor but wise men. And he, by his wisdom, delivered the city. And so this city was saved, right, from the attack, as it were, from the enemies, because of this poor wise man. He came up with a plot, perhaps. He got a great idea, and he saved the city from the enemies. What next? Well, it tells us in verse 15, yet no one remembered that same poor man. Yet no one. So instead of expecting a public recognition with a badge put on him, he was simply being ignored. Right? The city is now safe, and they go about their life as usual. But who cares about this poor guy, right? The poor wise man. Now, what is the point? All right, what is Solomon saying here? He says. So he now make an application. Now in verses 16 through 18, he's made an application. He's saying that, yes, wisdom is to be valued, for it saves you from harm. That's what he says in verse 16, right? And then I say, wisdom is better than strength. Wisdom is better than strength. Well, you are just brute strength. No, we say better to be wise, all right? And so he is valuing wisdom, right? Actually, wisdom is of great value. In fact, you see in verse 17, verse 18, he's making the same point. Verse 17, he says, words of the wise, spoken quietly, should be heard. And then in verse 18, he says, wisdom is better than weapon of wars. Now he's making an application from the story he has just told in verses 14 and 15 about the city being besieged by an enemy, and this poor wise man, or wise poor man, delivered the city. So it's a great thing to be wise. Right? But then, although wisdom is to be valued, but you better be prepared for some disappointment. I think that's how he's preparing us. You better be prepared for some disappointment. If you expect that just being wise and simply declaring the truth, like this poor wise man, or he says something, simple truth, right, that saved this city. Just being wise and simply stating the truth will gain you attention and approval. You will be disappointed. Right? You will be disappointed. Then we might scratch our head and say, why? Why don't these people in the city recognize this man? He's a wise man. He saved us from our enemy. He saved us. He gave us back our life, or gave back our city. So why is it that this man is not recognized? Now, actually, Solomon is actually carefully stating, his story here, or describing the people here. He said the reason is because this wise man is poor. This wise man is poor. You see, we like to listen only to people that appear to us, right, as great. Now, this seems to be the case in Acts chapter 4, right? In Acts chapter 4 and verse 13. Acts chapter 4 and verse 13. And here we have the early church. We have the apostles. And they were going around preaching the gospel. In other words, they're going around stating the truth, or preaching the truth. Then we are told in Acts chapter 4 and verse 13 that these people were surprised. And they say in verse 13, now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were uneducated and untrained men, they marveled. These are nobodies. These were fishermen. And that's how, now they say that, if you are a Nobel Prize winner, right, you can go up to go on a stage, right, and say anything you want, right, and people will listen to you. But if you are a poor, you may be wise, but untrained, no degrees, no education, you may say the wisest thing, like the apostles here. You know that the truth stated by the apostle, right here, the Apostle Peter and John, is that truth mentioned by Paul to Timothy. And you have known the Holy Scripture, which is able to make you wise unto salvation. That is the truth. That is the wisdom that apostles were preaching. But they were not recognized because they were nobodies. Right? They were nobodies. And so back to Ecclesiastes 9, and you see that Solomon seems to be emphasized or seems to be repeating this point here. Say, look, this man is not recognized. He saved the city. He saved their lives. But because he's a nobody. And so nobody paid real attention to him or recognized him. And that's why verse 16 through verse 18, kind of repeating that, it says, yes, wisdom is better than strength. It says, nevertheless, the poor man's wisdom is despised. And the words of the wise, quietly spoken, should be heard. People should listen. This is great truth. This is truth that leads unto salvation. But nobody pay attention because these are nobodies. Rather, verse 17, rather than the shout of a ruler of fools, people with great oratory skill, they have great showmanship, and they are great people. They say, don't listen to these people. They shout of the fools. But may other people, they speak the word quietly, but it's words of wisdom. He said, these people should be listened to, but nobody is listening to them. They ignore the poor man. Or in verse 18, wisdom is actually better than weapon of war. Maybe alluding to the story he had just told. These people come with a great army, with sophisticated weapon. But here is a poor man with great wisdom, defeated them. So you see, wisdom is better than weapons of war. But one sinner destroys much good. Now that is how he ends, right, this section about wisdom. He says, wisdom is to be valued, but not valued in this world. Especially it comes from nobody. But it saves, right? Wisdom saves. Then he ends by saying that, but one sinner destroys much good. Now here he is beginning to contrast with what he is saying in chapter 9. He's now alluding to what he's going to say next. Because he's going to talk about folly. I have told you about wisdom. Nobody wants. Nobody recognizes it. But now let me tell you about folly. About folly. And so, about one sinner. And the word sinner there is a replacement. It's a kind of substitute of the word folly. Because it is the opposite of wisdom. Remember, he's talking about wisdom, and then he says sinner. Can be translated, one fool destroys much good. Then he said, let me tell you about folly. And so in chapter 10, right, so now we move to the second thing, the second part of this passage here. So first part is about wisdom and the things that Solomon has to say about wisdom. And now he moves on and say, let me tell you something about folly. Something about folly. And here, maybe there's 3 parts here. First, we look at him telling us about what is folly, and then telling us about what folly does to us and how to avoid it. Right? What is folly? What folly will do to us and how to avoid it. First, what is folly? And that's an interesting question. I think it's wisdom, right? It's wisdom to know what is folly. So what is folly? Okay, let us look at what Solomon says here. In the first 4 verses of chapter 10. He says, number 1, folly is something very destructive, which is what he has just mentioned in verse 18 of chapter 9, that one folly destroys much good. One sinner destroys much good. Then he gives examples to, again, illustrate his point. Verse 1, he says, dead flies putrefy the perfumer's ointment and cause it to give off a foul odor. Now, that is the picture here. Here is a box of perfume. And then suddenly, in the perfume, you see a fly. Now, you see, it's very much like when you drink soup. Some of you like soup, so some don't like soup. Right? And if you drink mushroom soup, I love mushroom soup. Right? Then you see all the black things in the mushroom, right? And then you are drinking and enjoying because you love those black things, right? Dark things, not that black, right? The dark mushroom in the soup. You eat and you chew, right? And then suddenly you put 1 spoon, a fly. Worse, a cockroach, a small cockroach. And some people will scream, right? You say you spoil my soup. What? You don't have to have a lot of cockroaches, a lot of fly in the soup to spoil the soup. Just one will do and your appetite gone, right? Your appetite all gone. And that is what Solomon is saying. That is what folly is about. Just one little folly that spoils the whole thing. Now we can think in our life, right? There are many examples of this. People speak of a slip of the tongue. Just one little wrong word can destroy a relationship. Or we talk about one silly action. It can destroy. You can think of an example of David in 2 Samuel in chapter 11. We are told in the first 2 verses of chapter 11, there he was standing on the rooftop, idling, not going to war, and then seeing a woman naked, bathing. One little action, one miscalculation, his life is ruined, his family is gone. Now you see, that is what Solomon is warning us. Not very long ago, maybe about 2-3 years ago. He's a great preacher in the United States. Actually, if I mention his name, many of you would know him. One misstep, he put his name in a website advertising for prostitutes. And he was found out. It's gone. Around the same time, I've read of pastors and seminary lecturers, professors, and one in particular committed suicide because his miscalculation, his misstep destroyed his family. I think this is what Solomon is talking about. Just one little fly destroy the whole container of ointment or of perfume or whole bowl of soup. A little folly, Solomon says, can do a lot of damage. Avoid it. Be careful about it. And we are also prone to make so-called little mistakes like this. But it's wisdom to realize this. We can think of many other examples in the Bible. And it's almost like, is that action that kind of characterizes this person? You think of Judas, you think of betrayal. You think of Samson, you think of Delilah. Because you think of David, you think of Bathsheba. Dead flies, putrefied the perfumer's ointment. No, that is folly. So that is what Solomon is telling about folly. But next is that, see, folly, what is it? Not only it is very destructive, but it says folly is a hard matter. And that is where people don't understand. Verse 2, a wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart at his left. I think in the ESV translation is clearer as to what Solomon is saying. But what he says is this. Folly is a hard matter. Or in other words, stupidity is not a head thing. It's a heart thing. Sometimes we think it's all about the head thing. And whether you're stupid or clever, it's about the brain, about the head thing. It's not. It is the heart thing. And Solomon knows that because he writes. Solomon writes in Proverbs, right? In Proverbs 22 and verse 15, these words. He says, foolishness is bound up in the heart of the child. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of the child. So, and you see this folly, right? Say it is there in the heart. That's why they are doing foolish things. And so here in Ecclesiastes, you see that Solomon calls the wise man righteous. That's what you see in verse 1 of chapter 9, right? It says, therefore I consider all this in my heart, so that I could declare it all that the righteous and the wise. So he's talking about one kind of people, the righteous and the wise is righteous, the righteous is wise. And then folly, the fool is a sinner. As I pointed out earlier on in verse 18 of chapter 9, that one sinner destroy much. And then he gave an example in chapter 10 and verse 1, how one sinner or one foolish thing or one foolish act can cause great damage. And so That is how Solomon understands folly. And here in verse 2, what he means is that foolish decision is a hard decision. It's not a head decision. Why do you do foolish things? Why do you make mistake? Oh, brain problem. Not a brain problem, heart problem. Heart problem. That's why he says it's the direction of the heart. And Jeremiah said the same thing. The heart is deceitful, beyond all imagination. And we do all kinds of wicked things. Wicked things are foolish things. Folly is a hard matter. It is moral, right? It's a moral issue rather than an intellectual issue. So in other words, we can say that an uneducated man can be very wise, and very educated man can be very stupid. Now, that's not how the world sees, but it's how the Bible sees it. You can be very intelligent, but you're a fool. We never call intelligent man or a fool in this world, but the Bible does, because it is hard matter. Thirdly, he also tells us that folly is a tragedy. Verse 3, even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. That everybody knows that is wrong, but he cannot see. He just cannot see. You know that it is true spiritually in the church. Sometimes it's so obvious that this is what you should do. It's so obvious. It is so obvious. That is how you should live your life. But you just don't see it. Sometimes you can counsel people, you can talk under our breath. People still cannot see it. This is what verse 3 means. It is so obvious to others except him. That's why you see a fool talk a lot. It's like, it's enough. You're revealing, you're exposing your folly. But he still talk. Right? He cannot see. It's like the story of the emperor parading his new clothes, only to display his folly, right? Everybody can see he's naked except himself, right? And that's what Solomon is doing here. And third and fourthly, right? So folly is very destructive. Folly is a hard matter. Folly is a tragedy. And folly is just being stupid. Verse 4. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post. For conciliation pacifies great offenses. It's just stupid, right? Now it says here that, it's like the fool stokes a fire, as it will, when it's already overheating and you don't know when to stop. Well, there's another way of putting it, right? You're still starting a fire. You don't know. It's already danger point. Right? It's already dangerous. In other words, a fool cannot read the time and situation correctly. Or a fool cannot understand whom he's dealing with. I think that's what verse 4 is saying. Here is a greater man than you, and you want to fight. Come on, it's like some little country want to fight with the US. Right? That's stupidity, right? So folly is just being stupid. So that is what folly is. Then next, so what it does to us. Right? So Solomon begins to think about the consequence of foolishness. What it does to us. And then he mentioned a few things here from verse 5 through verse 15. Firstly, he says, now the consequence of foolishness, right, is that folly causes disorder, chaos, and confusion. Folly causes disorder, chaos, and confusion in society, in our lives. So in verse 5, he gave again examples here. So you see, the way Solomon does is that he states some principles here and truth, and then he illustrates it. And so he says, there is an evil I've seen under the sun, an error proceeding from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. For I've seen, verse 7, servants on horses, and princes walk on the ground like servants. What is Solomon saying here with these few examples? He said, this is stupidity. Oh, this is folly. He said, when there is a reversal of order and function and role. And that is what he's saying here, right? The folly is set in great dignity, but the rich sit in lowly places, the servants sit on horses, and the master or the princes walking like the servants. That when there is a reversal of order, or of function, or of roles, that is folly, that is foolishness. Put another way, when the servant rules and the master serves, when children give order and the parents obey, When male want to be female and female want to be male. When wife want to be husband and husband wants to be wife. And that is what we see in our society, and that is chaos, and that is stupidity. As far as the Bible is concerned, there's folly. There is a proper order. There is a proper way of doing things that God has designed. When we are not doing things according to what God has designed, that is folly. And that is going to hurt. That is going to hurt. There's stupidity, right? There's folly. And ultimate folly in the sense is when we become master and God become our servant. Right? And we begin to tell God what to do. And sometimes we reflect that in our prayer. For many people, prayer is ordering God. When God doesn't answer us, we get angry. How come God doesn't answer my prayer? How come He doesn't give me what I want? What kind of slave is God? That is a reversal of roles. Now, secondly, so what folly does to us is folly leads to self-destruction. Verses 8 and 9. He who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be bitten by a serpent. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits woods may be endangered by it. Now, folly leads to self-destruction. Now, here are a few examples again that Solomon gives to show how a man can be hurt by his own doing. Now, we know that every job has its own inherent danger that we recognize. But the wise anticipate those dangers. But fools are overtaken by whatever he's doing. And so folly can lead to, if you are not wise, right, it can lead to self-destruction. Now, thirdly, you see, folly brings unnecessary hardship. We see that in verses 10 and 11. If the axe is dull, one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. I think the one is very obvious. Use a knife. We're in the kitchen, you have a knife, and you cut, cannot cut. And you use more strength, cut, and you finally see all the chicken or the piece of meat become like minced meat. No longer nicely cut, right? They just show our stupidity. It's folly, right? Why don't you just go and sharpen the knife and then you can cut nicely according to what the way you want it? And that's what Solomon is talking about here. It brings unnecessary hardship. Well, there he says, in verse 11, a serpent may be charmed, right? May bite when it's not charmed. Babbler is no difference. So again, when you handle snake, right, it's better to charm it first, and then it won't hurt you. The reason why it hurt you because you don't do the necessary thing first. So it's just another illustration, but speaking of the same thing here. And so also with the work of God. Now in the church, very often we manifest the same kind of stupidity, the same kind of foolishness. We want to do ministry. We want to do church work. We want to evangelize. But we don't pray. We don't rely on God. Now we are trying very hard. And that's why Solomon, there's the psalmist, right? In fact, this is attributed to Solomon, or Psalms 127, where it says that unless the Lord builds, we labor in vain. We try, it's all in vain. Because Jesus says, for without me, you can do nothing. But when we try to serve God without God's strength, we try to do God's work without prayer. Now that is what Solomon is talking about. And then he says, what it does to us, what folly does to us, in verses 12 through 15, that it condemns us. Right? We are condemned by our own ignorance. Verse 12, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of the fool shall swallow him up. Or verse 13, the words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. Verse 14, a fool also multiplies words, and no man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? Verse 15, right? The labor of fools wearies them, for they do not even know how to go to the city. See, when you're silly or you're foolish, right? You talk too much. Well, I think that what Solomon's alluding here by in these few verses is that when a person talks too much, it destroys yourself, right? It destroys himself. because it only reveals his own reputation. It's a quote that I like, the quote which I probably have quoted before, at least in the hearing of some of you. Better be quiet and be taught a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. That is what Solomon is talking about. You talk too much and everybody now knows you. I mean, there are a lot of people like that. Actually, you don't know, you thought he's a smart guy until he talks. Then you know that he's actually a stupid guy, right? He condemns himself. And finally, how to avoid it. So Solomon has, great effort here, giving us another example to show us the danger and what folly is all about. And now, how to avoid it. Now, this is how we can avoid, stupidity or foolishness. Verse 16. So in verses 16 and 17, it says, the first thing to do is that beware of putting the wrong people on the wrong place, all right, in the wrong job. Verse 16, woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Now, these two verses is saying that when we put the wrong people in the wrong place, then we are in for trouble. So to avoid foolishness, to avoid trouble, to avoid destruction, that he will do the right thing, right? Put the right people in the right place. And so he says, when you put a child to be the king. I think for that reason, when Paul wrote to Timothy and gave him the list of the qualification of an elder, included in that list is that he must not be a novice. Don't put a child to be a leader. I think that's what Solomon is saying here too. Putting the wrong people in the right, in the wrong place. And so it says that is how we first of all avoid foolishness. And secondly, beware of idleness or laziness. Beware of idleness or laziness, verses 18 and 19. Because of laziness, the building decays, and through idleness of hand, the house leaks. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes for merry, but money answers everything. So he says here that things are going to cave in slowly but surely if you don't do anything about it. So when you see a small leak, fix it before it becomes, so the whole world comes down. And that would be wise, right? When you fix a small problem, rather than wait. A lot of people wait. You see a small problem, or some people drive car. Actually, I experienced this. I was really very stupid, right? I was driving my car. These days cars are very sophisticated. And because it's an auto car, there's maybe it's a good warning to some of you. You are not yet aware of this, right? And there's a light. Or, drive mode, right? Then the light will light up a drive, or D. Do you realize that when the lights start to blink, that means there's something wrong with your gear? I didn't realize that. So it was blinking. I thought, something wrong, but didn't pay attention. One day, the light goes off. No more blinking. It was just no more light. I thought maybe old car, lights are all gone. And one day I was driving through the church camp. Some spring something up in Tanjung Malim. And halfway, a big sound, boom! And the car just stopped. The good thing I was able to just move to the side. It just stopped and cannot start anymore. Send it to the workshop, gearbox. There's a light that warn you. Not paying attention to little sickness. That is folly, and that's what Solomon is talking about here. And then, so that's how we avoid it, all right? First, he says that don't put the wrong people, right, on the job. And secondly, when there's a small problem, fix it. Don't be lazy and don't be idle. And thirdly, beware of secret sin. Beware of secret sin. Verse 20. Do not curse the king, even in your thought. Do not curse the rich, even in your bedroom. Sometimes we do wrong things secretly in our heart. And Solomon says, don't. You think that nobody knows. He says, For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and the bird in flight may tell the matter. Sometimes, how come everybody knows about it? I told you the story just now about that pastor, secret sin, and suddenly the whole world knows about it. Beware this bird. God can expose us. Beware, of course, God is like the bird, right? He knows. He knows our secret sin. So don't think that you will never be caught, however well covered. Right? Don't think that you will never be caught. To think that you will never be caught, that is folly. That is folly. In fact, a lot of people are in trouble today exactly because they think that they can hide. But remember, God knows. Now let me bring to a conclusion. Now what really, in a sense, is the ultimate folly? We talk about folly, and Solomon gives practical examples how this folly is reflected in our life, in our daily life, and how, of course, we can see that even in our spiritual life, in the church. But the ultimate folly. Turn with me to Psalms chapter 2. Psalms chapter 2. And here the Bible constantly warns us of this great folly of man. Psalms chapter 2. And it begins this way. Why do the nation rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, against his anointed, saying, let us break their bones in pieces and cast away their cords from us. That is ultimate folly. That is stupidity. When you think that you can rise up against the King of Kings. And here is the psalmist describing the world that we live in. The rulers, the kings, the wise men of this world, the people conspire together to turn away from God, against the Lord and against his anointed, and wanting to break their cords, their bonds in pieces, meaning they do not want God to control them. They do not want God to tell them what to do. They want to be free from God. The Bible says the fool says in his heart, there is no God. That is folly, to reject God. That's what the psalmist is saying here. Why is it folly? Why is it folly? Verse 4. For God sits in the heaven. God who sits in the heaven shall laugh. The Lord shall hold them in derision. Then he will speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure. And God is saying to these people who rebel against him, you're dealing with God. And God will just laugh at your rebellion. You just need to just blow, right? And you'll be gone. So what should we do? What should we do? Verse 10. Now therefore be wise, O king. Be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in his ways. The greatest folly of man is when men reject God. If you're rejecting God this morning, never mind if you are intelligent. Never mind if you are filled with knowledge. Never mind if you're the smartest person in this city. If you reject God, if you rebel against him, you are the greatest fool. Because of what God can do to us. The day will come. God will judge the people of this earth. And all of us will have to give an account of ourselves to him. It's wise. It is wise to kiss the Son, verse 12, lest he be angry. It's wise to make peace with God and be reconciled through his Son. Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, indeed, foolishness is bound up in our hearts. So often we see that manifested in so many ways. We know that it's folly to live without God, folly to turn from his ways, folly to try to live by our own cleverness. Lord, we do pray that you might indeed give us wisdom to know wisdom. For this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.